I woke up stiff, the musty cushions of the old couch pressing into my back as I tried to shift. My eyes flicked open. The darkness was cut by a single streak of light shining from underneath the bathroom door. The clock on the wall showed 4:44 a.m., that brutal, in-between hour when the night feels never-ending and the day too close for comfort. My mouth was dry. The air in our small living room smelled stale, like something left in limbo. I heard a hushed voice. Liz's. She was in the bathroom, whispering into her phone, drawing out syllables with a gentle urgency that made my chest tighten. Even half-conscious, my mind snapped to suspicion. Was I imagining things? I forced myself to sit up, knocking my shin against the low coffee table. A dull thud of pain shot through me, and I bit my lip to keep from cursing out loud. 2 days ago, she hadn't come home. She'd said she was out with gym friends. That moment, hearing her now in the bathroom, the same closeted whisper, I couldn't ignore the parallels. Something churned in my gut. I stretched my back, still sore from another night spent away from our bed. I hadn't slept there in weeks. Instead, I'd made the couch my new fortress of discomfort. Maybe I was punishing myself, trying to match on the outside the wear and tear I felt on the inside. Or maybe I just couldn't face lying next to Liz with this tension between us. A swirl of rising panic fluttered inside me. Time. Time was my enemy. It had turned her from the woman I loved into someone else. And now 4:44 a.m. felt like a mocking wink from the universe, a signal that no matter how I tried to cling to the minutes we had left as husband and wife, it was slipping away. I rubbed my eyes, feeling every second in my bones. The hush of Liz's voice, the occasional muffled laugh. It was a knife in my ribs. My first instinct was to spring up, storm into the bathroom, and demand to know who she was talking to. But another part of me hesitated, the part that dreaded the truth. So I just sat there, breathing shallowly, anger twisting into pity, pity back into anger, cycling so fast it made my head spin. Eventually, the door creaked open. Liz stepped out. The overhead light from the bathroom cast her silhouette in a pale glow. She wore a thin robe, her hair pulled into a loose ponytail, and she froze when she realized I was awake. For a split second, guilt flashed across her face. Then she quickly masked it with something steeled and unreadable. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, voice a bit too casual. I just stared at her. I felt cold, inside and out. Words refused to come, so I gave a slight shrug. She didn't push. She disappeared into the darkness of our bedroom without another word. The hush of the house settled again, but it was heavier than before, weighted down by everything unspoken. I sat there, wide awake, the couch creaking beneath me. She must have thought I was stupid, either that or too exhausted to piece it together. But I wasn't a fool. I worked as a project manager in a tech company. I prided myself on reading subtle cues, solving problems, connecting dots. Lately, the problem was my own life, and the dots I connected spelled out betrayal. I used to think that an affair was something you only saw on those late-night talk shows or read about in cheap tabloids. But here it was, uncomfortably close. I could practically smell it in the air, mixed with the stale coffee from last night's mug on the table. I told myself I needed proof, some final, undeniable sign that Liz was cheating. But the truth was, deep down, I already knew. Still, I wasn't ready to accept the full scope of it. And that was my downfall. I thought if I kept quiet, if I avoided confrontation, maybe it would stop, or maybe she'd remember who we used to be. I stayed that way for an hour, staring at the wall, hearing my heart thud in my ears. By the time the first hints of dawn filtered through the blinds, I knew there'd be no more sleep for me. Later that morning, after Liz left for her fitness class, I found myself rummaging through the fridge, searching for anything to settle the knots in my stomach. Leftovers stared back at me accusingly. I shoved them aside. My mind was stuck on the memory of last night, of hearing her voice behind the bathroom door. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her silhouette, foam pressed to her ear, an almost tender timbre in her words. 3 months ago, she started talking about a new trainer at the gym. "Just a great coach," she said. "He really pushes me. Exactly what I need to get my body in shape." She was ecstatic, energized, a brightness in her that I hadn't seen in ages. I wanted to be happy for her. Instead, I felt something sour creeping in, a sense of displacement, like I was losing her. Time was chipping away at the relationship we'd built. The first real crack came the evening she didn't come home after her workout session. She was out late, no texts, no calls. When she finally did come back, well after midnight, her cheeks were flushed, and not just from exercise. She had excuses. She said there had been a group dinner, a few drinks. The story felt half-baked. Then I saw the text messages on her phone the next morning. I only caught a glimpse before she snatched it away, but it was enough to read, "I miss you too." My heart hammered in my chest. I confronted her, voice trembling with betrayal. She snapped at me, turned the blame around, said I was paranoid. She stormed out of the house. In that moment, I realized how fragile our marriage had become. I realized how easy it was for her to lie to me. Several days later, I was at my office downtown, a mid-tier tech firm that paid the bills but didn't ignite any passion in me. I was trying to focus on my tasks, but all I could think about was the previous night, how Liz hadn't come back until nearly dawn, again. My phone buzzed. An email from HR. "Interviews for the new corporate trainer position are happening today. Please attend the final candidate review at 2:30 p.m. It was unusual. The corporate trainer. Our company had been toying with the idea of an in-house fitness program to boost employee health. I'd barely paid attention to the announcements, but it seemed they were quite serious about it. When I walked into the conference room, I froze. Sitting there with a confident grin was a broad-shouldered man with short, dark blonde hair and electric blue eyes. Next to him stood Liz, flipping through a folder like she belonged there. My mind reeled. The sensation was like stepping off a cliff in a dream. That sudden, sickening lurch of freefall. Liz spotted me, and her eyes went wide for an instant. Then she plastered on a forced smile. The man followed her gaze and extended a hand. "Hey there, I'm Daniel Walker," he said, voice smooth, sure of itself. "Looking forward to working with you all, if everything goes well today." His handshake was firm. My mind flooded with images. Liz coming home late, breathless. The nights I spent on the couch, hearing her on the phone. My throat went dry. I tried to muster a polite greeting, but all that came out was a cold mumble. My boss introduced me more formally, glancing between the three of us with mild confusion. Liz gave some explanation, an awkward half-lie, calling me her ex under her breath, like it was the simplest way to define me to Dan. Ex. The word ricocheted in my head. We were still married, at least on paper, but apparently, in her mind, I'd already moved into the realm of the former. That stain of humiliation was overwhelming, yet I showed nothing on my face. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might break a rib. Dan gave me a polite nod, clueless about the avalanche I was buried under. The interview proceeded in a haze. I heard Dan talk about his background, all polished lines about sports science and personal training success. I heard Liz chime in with praise, almost glowing whenever he spoke. I watched them, his hand briefly brushing hers, that electric tension that only lovers share. My ears roared with a static that drowned out everything except one thought. He's taken my place. Time was devouring me, reducing me to an extra in my own life. I sat stiffly, arms crossed, eyes never leaving the pair. I only asked a few token questions, my voice cold and clipped. They answered politely, as if everything was normal. All the while, a silent storm raged inside me. Finally, my boss told me they planned to hire Dan. He'd be part of the new wellness initiative. I forced a nod and fled the room as quickly as I could without making a scene. The moment I was out in the hallway, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My palms were sweaty, my chest tight. I needed air. I escaped to the stairwell, slumped against the wall, and tried to steady my heartbeat. Anger flared up so fiercely, it nearly stole my breath. How dare he come here, to my turf, acting so casually? But the real anger, the deeper fury, was directed at her, for dragging our private humiliation into my workplace, and at myself, for letting it happen, for not standing up and exposing everything, for letting them treat me like I was nobody. That night, I arrived home to find Liz cooking dinner. She rarely did that anymore. The smell of sautéed onions mingled with the tension in the air. My senses felt scrambled, every sight and scent reminding me of old routines. She wore a fitted shirt, athletic leggings, her hair tied back in that familiar ponytail. My gaze drifted to the gentle arc of her neck. Despite everything, a pang of desire went through me, quickly followed by the sting of betrayal. "You're home," she said, a little awkwardly. "Figured I'd make something. Chicken stir-fry. It's almost done." She tried to sound normal, but I could sense the forced cheer. She nodded toward the pot sizzling on the stove. Then she swallowed, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. I walked to the sink, turned on the faucet to rinse my hands, letting the water run for too long. I was searching for a way to break the silence without shouting. "You brought him," I said finally, my voice so low it was almost a whisper, "to my company." She stirred the chicken in the pan, spatula scraping the bottom. "It's not like that," she began, but her tone lacked conviction. "He's taking a job there, yes, but I didn't plan this behind your back. It was open, and he was the perfect candidate." I turned off the faucet with a violent twist. "What are you trying to do, Liz?" "Rub it in my face." She banged the spatula down on the counter. "Don't start this, James. You're the one who's been distant. All you do is brood and assume the worst. I'm done being the only one fighting for something here." I froze, a swirl of anger and confusion rising. "Fighting for what?" I asked. "You're seeing him. Don't deny it. You left me behind the moment you found something more exciting." Her eyes flashed. "And how long was I supposed to wait for you, James? You showed no emotion. Just bury yourself in your work. Come home, slump on the couch, barely look at me. I needed more. You withdrew years ago." I stood there, absorbing her words, unable to refute the half-truths. Yes, I'd been overwhelmed at times, especially with work, but it never meant I stopped loving her. Did I fail to show it? Possibly. But her betrayal felt vastly disproportionate, like using a sledgehammer to fix a crack in the wall. Suddenly her phone buzzed on the kitchen table. We both glanced at it. I didn't need to see the screen to guess who it might be. My lips pressed into a thin line. She snatched the phone, and I saw that flicker of guilt again. I wanted to tear the device from her hand, fling it across the room, demand answers. But I did nothing. I just stared, my face a mask of forced calm. She slammed the phone face down, letting it buzz against the wood. "Dinner's done," she said sharply. Then she turned off the stove and stomped toward the bedroom, leaving me with the sizzling pan and the echo of her accusation. I stood there, heart thumping. Part of me wanted to chase her down, shake her, make her see my pain. Another part just wanted to vanish, to slip out the door and never look back. In the end, I scooped some of the stir-fry onto a plate, tasted one mouthful, and found I had no appetite. The humiliation was too potent. My pride as a husband, as a man, it had been dragged through the mud. I ended up sleeping on the couch again. Sleep was elusive. The digital clock blinked 2:47 a.m. when I last checked. Thoughts swirled. I remembered the day we married, the warmth in her eyes, the promise we made to care for each other. Now time had eroded those memories, or turned them into a mocking reminder of how far we'd strayed. Morning came, and with it a dull headache that throbbed behind my temples. I forced myself to get ready for work. Liz had already left, presumably to meet Dan at the gym or the office. I tried to block out the mental image of them meeting behind closed doors. Instead, I drove to my building, focusing on the tasks ahead. Anything to avoid the mental replay of her whispers. At the office, people were buzzing about the new corporate trainer. Dan was apparently making quite an impression. Friendly, energetic, charismatic. By noon, I had to pass through the new fitness center to get to a meeting. I caught a glimpse of them. Liz was leaning against the mirrored wall, watching him demonstrate an exercise to a small group of employees. Her expression was bright, enthralled. His toned arms flexed as he showed them the correct posture for push-ups, a slight grin touching his lips when their eyes met. I lingered for a moment, half hidden by the door. It was as though they were oblivious to the rest of the world. A hot flush of jealousy nearly made me do something stupid. My phone vibrated, a calendar reminder for my next meeting. So I turned away, ignoring the curious look from a colleague who spotted me. My stomach churned with equal parts shame and rage. That afternoon, my mind was a jumbled mess. Each hour seemed to drag, yet time also felt like it was speeding away from me. The concept of time as an enemy anchored itself in my thoughts. The longer I hesitated, the further I felt from any chance of salvaging my marriage. Or maybe it was already unsalvageable. Maybe now it was about saving myself, reclaiming some dignity. I decided to confront Dan. I caught him in the hallway, alone, as he wrapped up a conversation with a coworker about scheduling a session. My heart pounded. My lips felt numb, but I forced them to move. "Daniel, got a minute?" I asked, voice as even as I could manage. He turned, oblivious to the undercurrent. "Sure thing. James, right?" I nodded curtly. I motioned for him to follow me into an empty conference room. The tension in my shoulders was near unbearable. He wore a slight smile, eyes bright with curiosity. Once the door was closed, I stood facing him, arms crossed, trying to keep my fury contained. "I need to ask you something," I began. "You're involved with Liz, correct?" His expression flickered with caution. "Liz? We worked together at the gym. And now here." He paused, reading the hardness in my eyes. "Look, if this is about me taking the job, you know who she is to me." I cut in, my voice turning sharp. "You know she's my wife." That made him blink. He swallowed, then exhaled. "She told me you two were separated, or about to be. That it was just a formality." Separated. That single word hammered at the inside of my skull. "We're still married," I said, bracing my palms on the table. "You should know that. So whatever arrangement you have with her, it's not some free pass." He stood a little straighter, arms folding across his wide chest. "I care about her," he said quietly. "I didn't intend to cause you pain. But Liz has the right to live her life. You two seem unhappy. She said you're practically living as strangers." My fingers dug into the table's edge. This calm, rational tone of his only fueled my anger. "So you think that gives you license to jump in and take her from me?" He frowned. "Man, I'm not taking anyone. She's the one who came to me, confided in me. I can't pretend there isn't something between us." He hesitated. "Look, I'm sorry if this is painful. But it's between me and Liz now." It was a dismissive statement, and it stabbed me right in the gut. My jaw clenched, and I felt a crackle of tension in my shoulders. I wanted to throw a punch, but the rational part of me knew that would only make me look more foolish. So I just glared at him, my voice cold as I said, "You stay away from me at this office. Do you understand? We'll keep it professional, but I'm not gonna pretend this is okay." He studied me for a moment, expression unreadable. Then he nodded once. "Sure. I don't want trouble here." And with that, he walked out, leaving me shaking with rage and humiliation. Time marched on, and the situation only worsened. Liz kept up appearances at home by occasionally speaking to me about trivial things, groceries or phone bills, but every real conversation spiraled into tension. She avoided contact, spent more time at the gym, or helping Dan, with the corporate workout schedule. Meanwhile, gossip started circulating at work. A few colleagues asked me if something was going on. I denied, brushed them off. But inside, I was burning with shame. A part of me wanted to leave, pack a suitcase, vanish from this entire fiasco. Another part wanted revenge. The anger was building, a thick mass in my chest. But I wasn't sure what form revenge should take. Ruining Dan's job prospects. That felt petty. Publicly confronting Liz. That would only lead to more humiliation. I started having trouble focusing at work. My project deadlines piled up. My boss asked me if everything was okay, noticing how I stared off into space. I gave a weak excuse about stress. My nights were restless, each morning a disorienting plunge into the same nightmare. My sense of identity, husband, stable provider, was shredded. One day, I left the office early, thinking maybe I'd confront Liz at the gym. I pictured myself walking in on them, catching them in some compromising position. But at the last second, I chickened out. I drove home instead, taking a winding route around the suburbs. I parked outside a small cafe and just sat in my car, numb, watching people stroll by in the warm afternoon sun. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, unburdened by betrayal. Eventually, I went home to the silent house. The rooms felt emptier every day. I realized how rarely Liz's presence filled them anymore. Even when she was physically there, she was distant, as though mentally checked out. I slumped onto the couch, that same battered couch that had become my bed. My eyes drifted shut. For a moment, in the hush of late afternoon, I felt a faint sense of resolve forming in my mind. If I kept letting this situation define me, I'd be nothing but a victim. I needed to act, to break free from this cycle. But how? I didn't just want to rage blindly. No, I wanted something that would free me from this torment, that would let me walk away with my head high. The moment that crystallized my decision came a week later. Liz and I had another fight, this one loud and charged with raw emotion. It started when she came home from the gym around 9:00 p.m. I was in the living room, going over some spreadsheets on my laptop. The door slammed behind her, and she nearly tripped on my briefcase left by the entrance. "Oh, for God's sake, James. Can't you pick up after yourself?" she snapped, kicking the briefcase aside. Her face was flushed, hair damp with sweat, presumably from some intense workout. My jaw tightened. I closed my laptop, stood, and tried to remain calm. "We need to talk," I said, voice low. She let out a scoffing laugh. "About what?" "You glaring at me every time I walk through the door. You think I don't feel that constant accusation? Can you blame me?" I asked, fists clenching at my sides. "I know you're with him. Liz, I know you're sleeping with Dan. Stop treating me like an idiot." She dropped her gym bag on the floor. "And what if I am? The way you've been acting, cold, distant, never showing any sign you care. It's no wonder I found someone else who actually gives me attention." My nails bit into my palms. She rarely admitted it so blatantly. But here it was, spelled out for me, a rancid truth. "So that's it," I said hollowly. "We're done. Because from where I stand, you already decided that a long time ago." She stared at me, her breathing quick. Then she broke. Her voice rose, shaky with anger and maybe guilt. "You have no idea how lonely it's been, James. You shut yourself off. You make me feel like a stranger in my own house. You never fight for me." I stepped closer, my eyes locked on hers. "I'm fighting now," I growled, though it sounded hollow. "But all I see is you running into someone else's arms." She snatched her phone from her pocket, probably to message him. The idea of it nearly made me lunge, but something in me went cold. I just stood there, silent, letting her scream, letting her accuse me of this or that. She wanted a reaction, wanted me to snap. But I froze instead, my heart pounding so loud it deafened me. Finally, she flung the phone onto the couch and stormed into the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I stood in the middle of the living room, trembling. My thoughts pounded with the cruelty of time, of how it had turned love to rancor. I realized that the more I let this drag on, the deeper the knife would twist. My sense of manhood, shredded. My dignity, chipped away. Enough. I had to end it. End the marriage or end the charade. And do it on my terms. The next morning, Liz was gone before I woke. I dragged myself to the shower, letting the hot water scald my neck. My mind was a tempest of half-formed ideas of revenge. For a few insane moments, I fantasized about sabotaging Dan at work, exposing him as incompetent, or forging some complaint. But that only felt shallow. My real vengeance had to be bigger than that. It had to free me from this prison of self-doubt and humiliation. Revenge that doubled as release. I went to my desk, rummaging through old paperwork until I found our marriage certificate. It felt heavy in my hand, a piece of official paper that once symbolized everything. Now it just symbolized a relationship that was rotting. I set it aside, took out a legal pad, and started jotting down everything I needed to do to separate from Liz. If I couldn't restore our marriage, and at this point it felt dead, I might at least reclaim my life. It was scary. My hands shook, but a clarity began to form. Yes, divorcing her outright was a blow to my pride. But if she truly wanted to be with Dan, or flit between whatever new excitement came her way, so be it. I'd show her I wasn't just a doormat. I wasn't going to cling to something that only made me bleed inside, even if it felt like stepping off a cliff. I made an appointment with a divorce attorney for the following week. That small step felt like a monumental shift, a new current in my bloodstream. I didn't plan to tell Liz immediately. Part of me wanted to watch her realize that the comfort of my silence was over, that she couldn't have me as a fallback while she carried on with Dan. Maybe that was the seed of my revenge. Letting her know she had burned the bridge. She could no longer walk across it whenever she felt regret or wanted security. That evening, she texted me, "Working late with Dan on company fitness rollout. Don't wait up." My jaw clenched. Perfect timing, I thought. I typed back a simple, "Okay," then set my phone aside. My mind was oddly calm, like a quiet before a storm. A few nights later, near midnight, I decided to pick her up at the gym without warning. I drove through Seattle's dimly lit streets, a heavy drizzle spattering my windshield. Traffic was light, and the dull orange glow of the street lamps gave everything a brooding quality. I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, my headlights sweeping across a row of tinted windows. The gym sign still glowed overhead, though it was closed to the public at that hour. I entered through an employee door. Liz had once shown me where staff keyed in. Inside, the lights were dimmed except for a few overhead strips. The place smelled of rubber mats and sweat, echoing with the faint hum of the HVAC system. My footsteps sounded too loud on the polished floor. In a far corner, I caught sight of them. Liz and Dan. She was leaning against a workout bench, and he stood behind her, arms around her waist, guiding her posture. The closeness between them was undeniable. His fingers pressed lightly on her hips, her head tilted back, eyes closed in what looked like a mix of exertion and something else. His lips brushed her ear as he murmured something. Their voices were low, intimate. The flicker of erotic tension hung in the air. My lungs constricted as I realized how deep into betrayal they were, how confidently they displayed it even in her workplace. Time slowed. Each second felt like a year. I wanted to charge forward, shout at them, yank her away from him. But instead, I stood there, blood pounding, heartbreak flaring like a fresh wound. They didn't even see me. She turned, her arms looping around his neck. And they kissed. Not a quick peck. No, this was deliberate, passionate. My stomach twisted, my fists clenched so hard my nails cut into my palms. For a moment, I tasted the acidic burn of total rage. But then, just as quickly, it ebbed into a distant numbness. I had my proof. I'd known it all along, But seeing it in front of me, the raw physical evidence, was different. My mind flickered to the last time she touched me like that. So long ago, I couldn't remember it clearly. A wave of sorrow almost knocked me sideways. I stepped back, swallowed hard. I deliberately made a noise, letting my shoes squeak on the floor. They jerked apart, whirling around. Liz's eyes went wide, her lips parted as if she wanted to scream. Dan looked stunned, then uneasy. My breath came in shallow bursts. The smell of sweat and disinfectant thickened the air, turned it suffocating. Liz opened her mouth, perhaps to protest or apologize, but no words came out. Dan's face flushed. I recognized the expression. Guilt, overshadowed by a spike of masculine protectiveness. I could see him preparing for me to lash out. But I didn't. My lips curled into the faintest smirk, something sardonic and bitter. "Nice," I said quietly, my voice cold. "Real nice. Didn't think you'd be so blatant." Liz's eyes flickered with shock, then defiance. "James," she started, voice trembling. Why are you here?" I clenched and unclenched my fists. My heart hammered in my chest, but outwardly I forced calm. "Just needed to see it with my own eyes," I said. "Now I have." She tried to step forward. Dan put a hand on her arm, as though to shield her. My gaze slid to him, and for a moment I thought about telling him exactly what I thought. But instead, I just shook my head. "You two deserve each other," I murmured. "I won't bother you anymore." Then I turned on my heel and walked out. She called my name, voice cracking. But I didn't stop. My cheeks burned with shame, with heartbreak. But beneath it all, I felt that kernel of resolution I'd been cultivating. Yes, this was humiliating. Yes, it tore me open. But it also lit a spark of liberation deep in my chest. They came home together that night. Hours later, I'd been pacing in the living room, uncertain if I wanted to be there or not. When the front door swung open, they stood side by side, like two conspirators. Liz looked frantic, Dan solemn. "You didn't have to leave like that," Liz said, though her tone lacked conviction. "We could have talked." I laughed dryly, the sound hollow. "Talked? About what?" I saw what I needed to see. Dan stepped forward, brow furrowed. "James, I know how this looks. Spare me," I barked, and he froze. I gave them both a cool, assessing look. "I've been patient long enough. I've watched you flaunt this under my nose. Pretend it's all normal. No more." Liz opened her mouth to speak, tears brimming in her eyes, but I gave a curt shake of my head. My voice was controlled, quiet. "It's over, Liz. Whatever we had, whatever might have been saved, I'm done. Go be with him. He's all yours." She let out a sob, and Dan put a hand on her shoulder. The sight made my stomach churn, but I refused to let them see me as weak. I turned away, heading to the kitchen, refusing to crumble in front of them. They stood there, uncertain, as though expecting an explosion that never came. Finally, I heard Dan mumble, "Let's go," and they stepped out, shutting the door behind them. I leaned against the counter, hands trembling, tears burning my eyes. The house was silent, and I was alone with it all. In the days that followed, I set my plan in motion. I'd locked up the few valuables that mattered to me, especially items inherited from my late grandfather. I opened a new bank account. Then I filed for divorce, quietly, swiftly. I hired a lawyer recommended by a friend, a gray-haired man with a calm demeanor who seemed unimpressed by Liz's betrayal. He was methodical, unflappable, exactly what I needed. Liz tried calling me, texting me, even showing up once at the house. Sometimes she sounded angry, sometimes tearful. She'd vacillate between blaming me for her affair and apologizing, as if she wanted to keep me on hold in case it didn't work out with Dan. I didn't let her in. For the first time in months, I felt I had the upper hand, because I wasn't playing their game anymore. Meanwhile, Dan tried once to corner me at the office, probably to smooth things over or protect his new position. I refused to speak with him. I emailed my boss and asked to be excluded from any departmental collaboration with him, citing personal conflict. The boss, a discreet older man, obliged. I wasn't sure how long Dan would last anyway. There were rumors he wasn't as polished in corporate wellness as he claimed. One afternoon, I caught sight of Liz and Dan in the cafeteria, speaking in hushed tones. She looked upset. He tried to console her, a hand on her shoulder. I noticed a flicker of tension in his posture, the same tension I felt so many times. Perhaps he was learning that infidelity doesn't guarantee a happily ever after. Time has a way of turning fresh excitement into the same old problems. Their bubble seemed less radiant than before, but that was no longer my concern. Day by day, my despair lifted, replaced by a grim determination. This was my revenge. Severing the ties, refusing to beg or compromise, letting them face the reality of what they'd done. Any illusions they had of me as a spineless husband were shattered. I was forging the new path, and if that path led to a lonely place, at least it was honest. The divorce process was messy, as all divorces can be, but I found moments of empowerment in it. I discovered that letting go, truly letting go, was liberating. My final confrontation with Liz happened a month after our court filing. We met at a coffee shop to sign some documents and discussed logistics of dividing our belongings. She arrived wearing a simple cardigan, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked tired, older than her 35 years, but still had that athletic grace in her posture. I sat across from her, leaning back in my chair, arms folded. The clatter of cups and subdued chatter of patrons formed a mundane backdrop to what felt like a final chapter of our lives together. "You sure this is what you want?" she asked softly. I never imagined we'd get here. My throat felt tight, but I managed to nod. "We're already here, Liz. There's no going back, not after what's happened." I inhaled, searching for calm. "It's more than just the cheating. It's the way you left me behind. Made me feel like I was worthless. I can't be in a marriage like that." She lowered her gaze to her cappuccino. "I'm sorry," she said at last, tears shining in her eyes. "I didn't think it would end up like this. I thought maybe I just needed excitement. Dan offered that. But now I see how deeply I hurt you, how I hurt us." I heard the waver in her voice, and for a moment, pity swelled up in me. But I remembered everything. The whispers at 4:44 a.m., the nights she never came home, the scene at the gym. My bitterness ran too deep. "Sometimes," I said quietly, "I think we both lost track of who we were. Maybe time wore us down. Maybe we needed to talk more, try harder. But I can't change the past, and I can't stay in a place that shatters my pride day after day." She nodded, tears slipping onto her cheek. "Will you ever forgive me?" I looked at her for a long moment. "I'm working on it," I said, "for my own sake." She squeezed her eyes shut, then opened them. "I want you to be happy." For once, I believed she meant it. But it was too late. I signed the papers, she signed them, and we stepped out of the coffee shop into the crisp late afternoon air. The finality was terrifying, yet also a weight off my chest. She lingered, as if wanting to say something more, but I just gave her a small nod and turned away. I walked to my car, feeling an odd mixture of sorrow and relief. The official divorce decree arrived in the mail weeks later. By that time, Liz had already moved out, staying with Dan or perhaps in a place of her own. I didn't care enough to keep track. I'd let go. My house felt different, an echoing emptiness that was neither comfortable nor agonizing. Gradually, I rearranged furniture, gave away old decorations that reminded me of her. I started sleeping in the bed again, reclaiming that space. At work, Dan's presence was still felt, but I avoided him. My boss discreetly minimized our interactions. I heard rumors that the corporate fitness program wasn't going smoothly. Dan lacked certain organizational skills, and there had been complaints about scheduling. A small part of me gloated. I didn't intervene. That was his downfall to manage. Perhaps he'd survive, perhaps not. I'd moved on. One late afternoon, I found myself stepping outside, soaking in the crisp Seattle air. The sky hung low and gray, but the drizzle had paused. I took a deep breath, feeling the chill in my lungs, and allowed myself a moment of reflection. It was strange. I'd lost my wife. In a sense, lost the future I once envisioned. But I felt more alive, more awake than I had in years. Time was an enemy that had undone my marriage. Yet now, I had time to rebuild my life on my own terms. A memory surfaced. That first morning on the couch, hearing Liz whisper in the bathroom. The 4:44 a.m. tension. The humiliation. The heartbreak. Now, in the wake of everything, I recognized that my revenge had never been about hurting them back. It was about freeing myself from the agony of staying a silent victim. I was no saint. I'd wanted to lash out, inflict damage. But ironically, the best blow I could strike was to walk away and regain my sense of self-worth. I looked at my watch. 5:17 p.m., another day behind me. Another step forward. Tonight, I might go out to a new restaurant, try a different routine. Maybe meet some friends for a drink. Maybe even drive to the coast and watch the waves. Just me, alone with the sound of the ocean. I didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long while, I felt something stirring in my chest that could almost be called hope. I stepped off the curb, heading to my car. A faint breeze brushed across my face, carrying with it a hint of salt from the bay. I thought about Liz, about Dan, about the life I'd left behind. A pang of sorrow lingered, but it was dulled by acceptance. No, revenge wasn't retribution, it was liberation. And at that moment, the sense of weight lifting from my shoulders was all I needed to keep going. I climbed into the driver's seat, exhaled, and started the engine. Then I drove forward, leaving the ghosts of my broken marriage behind me, determined to discover whatever came next.